Hello and welcome to this joint episode between Podcraft and Creatorcraft. Joining me once again, Jacob. How are you doing, Jacob?
Hi, good morning. I'm good. It's good to be back. I'm getting kind of used to this, to be honest. Maybe we'll swap you out for Colin on Creatorcraft.
Yeah, big upgrade that, wouldn't it? The downloads, they would skyrocket if you did that. So
They would.
We'd have to make sure the hosting was capable of, dealing with such high volume. But I'm sure we could pull it off. We've got another cool topic today, haven't we? 3 signs you have an amateur creator mindset. I was just laughing at the thought that the first one would be that you did all your social media graphics with crayons. Would that be one of them, do you think?
Do you know what? These days it would probably be a little bit different. I mean, if you're quite good with crayons,
Yeah.
you might stand out a wee bit.
Yeah, viral crayons.
Viral crayons, yeah.
Let's get into it. So I guess the first thing is to deal with that term amateur creator. Like, there's nothing actually wrong with being an amateur creator. I suppose it's worth pointing that out up front, isn't it? But I suppose where this applies is that, if you're trying to build any sort of business, even like a side hustle or just generate some income, then this amateur creator mindset could certainly hold you back. But hopefully we've got a couple of wee tips and techniques that folks could put in place today. So before we get into them, is this anything that sort of resonates with you in the past? Like, have you recognised any of these things in your previous content ventures?
Yeah, definitely. It's I think we've got it on our list here, but the biggest thing is just the writer's block, and it's the difference between like being able to sit down with an inspiration and jam it out and have quite a good time of it, and actually having a set time every week that you need to sit down and have that inspiration. And I have really struggled with that in the past. Because I get a fair share of those moments where I can just sit down and jam out an idea, but yeah, it was a whole different kind of kettle of fish, particularly working here with the podcast host, with Alitu, and content becoming a much bigger part of my life. You force yourself to figure out the process that works for you to make yourself a bit more of a content factory than just whenever the inspiration strikes kind of deal.
I like that term, content factory. But you've alluded to it already, like the first one here, the first sign that you might be suffering from an amateur content creator mindset is writer's block. And this doesn't literally mean writing, is it? This could be creating anything, I suppose. So what do you think a block suggests? Do you think rather than this being a problem of just creating the content, do you think there's more? Do you think there's something deeper going on with maybe the messaging or just your brain maybe not being confident in what you want or are trying to actually say?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely been a case of not being sure of what to say, but also not being confident enough to say the things that you're unsure about. And actually, it was getting much clearer on what is the purpose of what I'm doing, and who am I writing it for, or whatever recording it for. It was that kind of gave me a little bit of structure, and that's what kind of tipped over. But if you are just relying on these sort of like sporadic brainwaves, these ideas that come and go, then you're gonna jump on those because you feel quite confident in them. But when it comes to actually writing anything else outside of those little moments of inspiration, I felt like I was doubting my topic or my ability to talk about it or explain it. But yeah, being really clear about who it is that you're creating that content for, and what the purpose of that content is, it opens up a lot. It just even gives you a little bit of perspective on maybe this topic that if it's an educational type of thing, you want to share your knowledge on something, you might not feel super confident in your ability to teach that because I've not got that much experience. I've only done this, however many times. But actually, with a little bit of perspective that you're, for example, you're teaching someone brand new to knitting how to knit their first thing, whatever you call it, a knitted project.
A sweater.
A sweater, I suppose. Yeah, with that little bit of perspective that actually I'm teaching someone to make their first sweater or their first sock or whatever, I've got way more experience than they do, and I am totally capable of teaching this. And I think that's where the kind of the confidence kind of comes into it, where the clearer you are on who it is that you're making it for and what the purpose is, the more you'll find that actually, yeah, I've got a lot to say, and then you can sit down and comb through stacks of ideas to help them.
Yeah, that clarity on exactly who it is you're speaking to. Again, whether this is literally writing, whether it's recording a podcast, recording a video, whatever. When you are clear about who that person, who you're reaching, I think this gets easier. And it obviously all depends on the foundations of what your content is as well, what it's aiming to do, what it's aiming to achieve. A big one for me is just that I think it's a mistake to sometimes just sit down in front of the computer and say, I'm going to create something right now. Because not all part of the creative process needs to be done in front of the screen. Certainly in the past, I've used long walks or stuff like that, just menial tasks around the house to work on an idea so that when I actually sit down to write it, I mean, it is written, it's not literally written, but in my head, I've got the outline, I've got what I want to say, and then it's very easy to just type the words after that. So I don't know, how does that kind of compare with your experience in the past?
Oh, this is a relatively recent thing for me, the walking work. I actually just wrote a little bit in our Creative Craft newsletter about this yesterday, that I think I actually do most of my best thinking work not at my desk.
Yeah.
And I still feel quite guilty about it. But what I've started doing is, as a way to kind of assuage that guilt a little bit, is I will have my phone obviously, and I will just record voice memos. So rather than just doing the thinking and getting back to my desk and then sit down and do the thing, whatever it is, usually it can be content, can be other things too. I'll go on a walk at lunchtime, and I'll basically just speak into my phone, and then I'll get the transcript for that, and then I'll feed that into Claude and ask it to tidy it up, and that becomes the outline for whatever the thing is that I'm about to work on, whether it's content, whether it's marketing strategy, whatever it is. I find that helps a lot, actually. Sitting down at a desk at a computer and saying, right, go. That just doesn't. Yeah, I think a lot of people have that same experience where it's much more difficult. But actually, when you remove yourself from the situation, when you kind of get moving, and it certainly helps me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, going back to, again, this is fiction creating, not non-fiction creating. But when I was doing my audio drama, I used to just work on an episode by episode basis, and although I had a grander idea of the story, I would sometimes write myself into wee corners or cul-de-sacs with the subplots, and then I would have to try and figure out on the fly how to get myself back out of it. And I always found no amount of sitting in front of a Word doc or that could fix it. But see, an hour and a half long walk with not even listening to music or that, just let's just go and figure this out. And it was like magic. Like, you could really, after I'd say about 45 minutes seemed to be that sweet spot where things would just start to come together, and you'd be excited to get back and just get it all on paper or on the electronic alternative, I suppose. Another thing, this is made easier these days. We talked about AI a fair bit recently, but with AI, even getting some starting prompts, getting AI to actually prompt you rather than you prompt it. Maybe it could ask you some questions to get you going. So there's big opportunities there to get you kind of started as well, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And it's so easy to do. I mean, anyone can sign up now for ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. And you can just prompt it to simply ask you questions. Actually, Colin brought a tool to Creative Crafts just recently, made by Ali Abdal. It's a AI ghostwriting tool, and it does exactly that. It's not written; you actually speak into it, and you might record some messy notes, and then it will actually just continue to ask you questions about it. I'm just trying to find the name of it right now. VoicePal, AI ghostwriter in your pocket. I've not tried it yet, but Colin has, and it sounds like exactly that sort of thing. It's pretty much made for that. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to go and then, write a whole whatever it is that you're working on. I think the idea of it is that messy notes in by voice, and then it will ask you follow-up questions via text in an app.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one specific tool, quite tuned for that. I think it's tricky when everyone can access Claude and ChatGPT, but not everyone is they're not gonna prompt it necessarily right unless you spend a bit of time figuring out how to do that. So yeah, always. Yeah, if there's a specific tool that someone's figured out the nuances for, good idea to try that. And if you're like me, where you quite like speaking out loud, rambling a little bit to get it out your brain, find it a bit quicker, a bit less, a bit more bandwidth than writing, then yeah, perfect tool.
I guess another big solution to this is just having a plan or having a dump of ideas. Personally, I've got a Trello board. So we talked recently on Podcraft, it was myself and Colin talked about the Whisper titles framework, all the different ways you can title your content, but this also fed into like what I'm actually going to talk about, and it just like it generated like infinite ideas, no matter what topic or niche. Did you come across that at all, the framework?
No, not yet, no.
I'll have to share that with you. I'm sure the listener will be familiar with it, but if not, I'll put a link in the show notes. But yeah, all these different types of ways that you could create content, whether it's why content, whether it's like insider content, the secret behind or the story behind, or, this thing will never be the same again. There's all these different kind of ways to title content, but also this is as a great byproduct giving you ideas as well. So just having like a dump of ideas of stuff you want to create, that means that in theory you're always coming to the table, even if you don't immediately know what you want to create something about. You've got all these ideas, and it's all in there, it's all in your plan. So again, that in theory should help with this just I don't know what to say at all sort of problem.
Yeah. I've got a question for you, actually. Do you start with a title, or do you start with the sort of body or the meaning of the body first?
I would say it used to always be the content in the title. And then I would say it got a bit more 50-50, and now I would say I'm more inclined to lead with the title. So right. I don't really know what's going on there and why that necessarily changed, but yeah, I'd be more inclined to lead with a title now. What about yourself?
Yeah, I seem to do body first and then title. I seem to change the title many times because sometimes my idea for what I wanted the actual content to be doesn't actually pan out the way I saw it panning out. Maybe the conclusion's different or maybe whatever. So I always start with the title, but it's never the same at the other end.
Yeah.
And possibly that'll just change with experience, like it has with you. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
I was just going to say, it's a nice way to capture an idea, though, a title.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a Trello board, yeah, you can say quite a lot with just a title. It might just be a working title, but it's an easy way to encapsulate an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I've like our colleague Lindsay who does works on the written content with me. I've just handed her literally a title in the past, and if that title is good enough, she doesn't even need a brief for the article. Like an example of that was your podcast won't go viral, and that's a good thing. That was just a title that I handed her, and I didn't say anything else about the article, and she wrote the article and it was pretty much aligned with what I had in mind. So
that's cool.
Hopefully the idea there is that a good title kind of lets you know what's coming, but you've then got the room to get into it and elaborate on it. All right, on to the next one then. Number 2 on these signs that you're suffering from an amateur creator mindset. You rely on motivation and inspiration. What's wrong with that, Jacob?
It waxes and wanes, doesn't it? It waxes and wanes, and no one that gets paid to turn up and do a bar job relies on motivation.
Exactly.
You turn up every day whether you feel like it or not.
Yeah, I always think that too. I've had some very menial jobs in the past, and I always thought of that, like turning up to maybe cut a bit of grass outside in the rain and saying to the boss, like, I'm not really feeling it today. The ideas aren't coming, and I know what I would have been told in that situation. So There's a really good quote actually. This is attributed to Chuck Close, but it's maybe just one of the internet quotes that goes about. But anyway, it says, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work." And I've always really liked that wee quote.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that's the literal definition of professional is that you get paid for it, but I think you can probably get paid for it and not do that as well. So I feel like that is the real definition of being a professional, is being able to turn up every day, whether you feel like it or not. You're not waiting for the muse to strike. Yeah,
and I mean, motivation is a very temporary thing. It's great when you have it, but you can't rely on it. And one other thing that we've kind of not mentioned here, but a lot of folks in the creative realm, they talk about flow state, and a lot of writers chase this, like, oh, if I could just get into flow and that. But for all I know about flow state, like, it's kind of a mythical beast. Like, you will find it now and then, but it's quite rare, and it's really dangerous if you're trying to find wait on the motivation to then start writing or working on something in the hope that you'll get into this flow state. And that's not a way to guarantee that you're going to be creating very much and very often, I suppose, is it?
No, it's weird. Like, I've definitely experienced that, and I've kind of actually found some ways to sort of trigger it in myself, or just like create the best conditions for it. But I think it is dangerous to rely on that as well. You can't. If I had to describe it, it would just be like really fast, fun, and productive. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a fantastic feeling, but you cannot feel like that all the time. Yeah. Otherwise, you will end up in that. It's the same, in a way, you're just back to that waiting for motivation thing again. There has to be a baseline. And sometimes you will get that flow when the conditions are right, or whatever it is that brings it on. And sometimes you won't. But yeah, I think it's probably just as dangerous. And I don't know though. Like, do you think that like high level professional writers, high level journalists that are writing every day furiously, do you think that they are consistently in flow? I mean, what do you think the story is there? We might have to find one and ask them.
Yeah, no, I don't think so at all. Like, again, I'm not a neuroscientist, and I can't believe I ever have to give that clarification. But like, I don't think a lot of folks are ever in flow. Like, it happens now and then. But no, I would say, like, if you're a journalist at a newspaper or that, I'd be surprised if it hits you very often. I could be wrong. Yeah. I could be wrong, and as I always say, I often am. But yeah. One of the things I kind of think that's relevant to this is, and I listen to Cal Newport's podcast a lot, Deep Questions. It's really, really good. And he's big on rituals before you start your work, just to kind of switch your brain over into a creation mode. So again, you're not trying to make yourself inspired or that, but there is a degree of, like, if you've got a certain ritual, it can get your brain just in the right gear for sitting down and going to work. And he talked about examples like, I think it was Charles Darwin, before he started his work, he had this path in his garden that he would just walk like 5 minutes, do a loop, come back to his desk or whatever, and that was him in work mode. But these rituals, Cal Newport, he talks about, could be anything. It's just like, making your coffee and or going to a different location, even if it's still in your own house. So just as these little rituals could kind of help switch you into that creation mode. And, if that helps you, it's definitely worth testing and exploring, I think.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And on that, it might not be true for everyone, but a sort of hack that I've found for that motivation when I'm feeling I'm lacking it is forcing yourself to go and work somewhere else completely. A co-working space ideally, and my thought there is that for me, certainly being surrounded by people who are just getting shit done, I find that very motivating. I find that very, but if you're having a kind of low day and you're working from home, you're sat on your couch and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get this done? Yeah, that doesn't help at all. Get yourself out if you are actually struggling with motivation. Even a cafe, I found, helps, to be honest.
Yeah.
And on those most motivated days where you've got that flow, it doesn't matter where you are, but that bit of having that in the toolkit, I think, And I totally agree on those rituals with Cal Newport. Really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those unclear boundaries between work and home could be a real problem. And this was probably most evident during the pandemic. But, if somebody was working from home and maybe they've got a very small house and very limited space, so, it's literally on the sofa, the same sofa that they've sat and watched Yellowstone the night before, and now they're down there with a laptop on, and it's just difficult to get your brain to say, now we're in work mode. You've got an Xbox sitting there. You go to the bathroom, you see the washing's needing done. So I think there's a lot to be said for just changing locations, even if you can't afford an office or anything like that. Like you said, Jacob, just get to a cafe if you can. If you live in a nice enough climate, just get outside in the garden, or get outside in a park somewhere. But changing your location could really go a long way to just getting you into that work mode, I think, isn't it? One wee tactic that I've always loved is one that came from Ernest Hemingway. He used to talk about, I'm speaking like I knew him, he used to talk about how he would finish a sentence mid-sentence. He'd finish his writing mid-sentence for the day and go and drink his daiquiri. And then when he came to work the next day, the first thing he had to write was just finish that sentence. So he just started writing, and he claimed that that always got him back into the groove very quickly. I've used this in a very obscure way with miniature painting. Like, I'm painting a Blood Bowl team at the moment, and this isn't like a creative business or that; it's a pure hobby. But I found that after putting the wee one down to bed and that, you need to kind of force yourself to start painting. At least I've found so anyway. So I've always, like, when I've been painting the night before, I've left a really easy bit that's, I could pick up the following night. And, once I start painting again, I'm like, well, I might as well do this bit. It's really easy. Yeah. And then you've got the brushes out and that, and you just keep going. So I think there's definitely something in that when it comes to your creative work as well.
Yeah, definitely. Leaving a little breadcrumb trail for yourself. I find I do that. I tend to leave a fun thing. I'll not do a fun thing today, or something that I, for whatever reason, judge as fun. And I'll leave that purposely for tomorrow because I know I'm going to enjoy doing that first thing tomorrow. And yeah, you do. You totally leave the trail of Skittles for yourself.
Too busy or baffled by tech to start your podcast? Well, Alitu makes it easy. Record solo or calls, edit by deleting text, or with our drag and drop tools. Alitu even removes ums, ahs, and filler words automatically. And with built-in hosting, you can publish direct to Apple, Spotify, and many more apps with just one click. Try Alitu free at alitu.com. That's ALITU.com.
Alrighty then, so we've covered writer's block, we've covered motivation and inspiration, and the third sign you're suffering from an amateur creator's mindset: you're afraid of people stealing your ideas. What do you think about that one?
I'm still afraid of that. But it totally does stop you from doing stuff, though. It does. It's bad. Way less of a problem for me than it once was, but yeah. It's also a totally fake fear, I think. I don't think it's a real fear at all. I think it's totally masking fear of everything else, fear of being judged and fear of not succeeding and all of the other baser human fears that we have. I would say it's a bullshit fear, but I do feel it myself also.
I wish I could remember who said this, but I was at a talk once where the speaker asked the audience to put your hand up if you've ever jumped out the shower to go and suddenly register a domain name. Have you ever found yourself doing that before, Jacob?
Totally has. Yeah.
And it's funny that when you get that idea, your immediate thought is like, oh, the whole world will be thinking about this right now as well. But I guess, to take a step back, like, an idea is completely worthless unless you do something with it, isn't it? So ideas themselves, they don't have any inherent value. And that's a difficult thing to kind of realise, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, totally agree. It's the implementation of it. There can be two people implementing the same idea. One of them can end up being pretty worthless, and the other, whatever it be. Really good example of that was actually, this is a great example. back to like 1980 odd or something like that, and the team from Apple went to see a place called Xerox PARC, and it was like a research center for, you know, that company that makes printers now. They had some like really high tech research going on for personal computers, and in this Xerox PARC there was just this team that were allowed to pretty much do whatever they wanted to do and sort of imagine the future of computing, which was, you know, pretty breaking edge stuff at the time. And one of the things that they had there was a personal computer with a graphical display that you could drag things around, and a little box on the desk that was a mouse. And this idea, this really, really brilliant idea, to be fair, they had worked it up and they'd got this prototype working in this lab, but they never actually turned it into a product. They never actually did anything with it. And the team from Apple came, saw this, came a few times and said, "Can I just see a little bit more of that, please?" And that turned into some of the first personal computers in the world. I think the Apple Lisa came out of it, and later the Apple Macintosh. And yeah, it was, they had the idea first, but they didn't actually do anything with it. And they completely lost out on that, and now they are printer manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that there will obviously be examples, and you hear of that again. I can't remember the term for it, but there's like an almost scientific term for when two completely independent, say, scientists on other sides of the world who've had no communication with each other, they arrive at the same conclusion at the same time. Like, there's a term for that, which escapes me. So obviously, you know, in extreme examples we see this, but generally, like I'm just thinking of so there's a tabletop miniature game designer that I interviewed called Mike Hutchinson, and he was talking about the fact that you know, he doesn't want people's ideas. He's got plenty of ideas of his own, and it's going to take him the rest of his life to actually action those, you know, those ideas that he's very excited about because they're his own. And he says the amount of times that, you know, and maybe he'll be at a party or that, and somebody will ask what he does, and he says, "I'm a game designer." He says the amount of people that say to him, "Oh, I've got a really good idea for a game," and he's like, "Well, I don't want it because like I've got like 600 of my own, and that's going to take a long time to work on." And then I've heard that from novelists as well. You know, you meet somebody, you know, I'm a fiction writer or whatever. "Oh, I've got a great idea for a story." It's like, well, go and write it then. Like, I don't want it. So
yeah, good for you.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, you know, I'm not saying we don't get good ideas ourselves, but I think we overestimate how excited other people would be about our ideas. So
yeah,
I think removing a bit of that fear around it. Yeah, and just getting to work on them. Like, if you're that excited about it, just work on it. But don't guard it with terror, you know, in case you publish something and suddenly it becomes a £1 million product that you have nothing to do with. So
yeah. I mean, I think probably the best thing you can do for that is to publish as much as you can about it. So
Yeah.
that there's all of this evidence that it was your idea, you know, and even if someone else does do it, you know, do whatever the idea is, it's there's many ways to skin a cat, and your approach is probably going to be different to theirs. So it's still worth doing, even if it's already out there.
yeah, do you think documentation could be a good part of that? Again, going to the game design example, you know, if I come up with what I think is a great game idea, it might be years before I could bring that about. But, you know, I could straight away create content on, like, here's the game I'm going to make. Follow my process here. Let's start from scratch. You know, here's how I'm going to outline it. And, you know, it solidifies that this is my idea, but also I'm doing the work on it, but it's kind of out there at the same time. So do you think that could be a good approach?
Definitely. I mean, just from a marketing perspective alone, that whole... it was really big once upon a time, the idea of kind of building in public, but I think it's a pretty timeless idea, really. It's a way that you can take on a big project and build an audience as you do it, rather than waiting for it to be done. Because I think that's another, it's another pretty bad pitfall, really, is working on something big that you've not validated in any way, that no one knows about, and then spending years of your life on it and getting to the other end, and you know, it flops. You'll probably do a lot more learning along the way if you actually open the doors and let other people see it and, you know, give you their thoughts. And yeah, I think documenting it publicly is, it's a good way to do it, and a good way to kind of get over the fear quickly as well. Because if you can start talking about it straight away, Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like it's another discussion entirely, but in those very early days when content marketing became a thing, and the first people who started to say, here's all the information I have for free, and other folks that were their competitors were thinking, like, are you mad? Like, you're just putting all that stuff out there. Like, why would you do that? And, as we know, it ended up working really well for the trust aspect and just the buy-in of the people doing work that folks were interested in. So, I guess that's it. So that's three signs you're suffering from an amateur creator mindset. Not only that, but hopefully some tips to kind of work around it. So writer's block, waiting on motivation and inspiration, and then being a big old scaredy cat about your ideas. So happy enough with that, Jacob?
Yeah, I feel much more an amateur walking away from this episode than I did coming in, so thanks.
Put those crayons away or get them out, depending on how we're going to look at
it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's been good to have another chat, Jacob. I'm sure it won't be the last time. And thanks to the listener for following along. Hopefully that's helped you, and we'll chat to you again on the next one.